Welcome back to Prof E Plays. I'm Prof E, and this video is going to be a little bit different than most of mine, in that I'm not actually going to be playing anything, nor particularly giving instruction for that matter. I just wanted to give a little bit of a play report on what I am doing in terms of my social role playing, which is not most of what I do. But in any case, it is some of what I do. So I figured, why not just put together a short video as I work in other stuff, so that you can have some idea of that. So anyway, so here is what I've been doing. I have been playing a game of Shadowdark. Running a game of Shadowdark for some of my friends. I'm doing it kind of, I think I would describe it as semi-open table, if that makes sense, right? So in principle, I like the idea of like what is the Western Marches kind of style, where you have, say, lots of different groups. So you have like maybe, I don't know, a dozen people or more that are in effect on the mailing list, right? And then ask for sessions because there are things they want to do, and it's very player driven. So in principle, I kind of like that idea. In practice, it doesn't really seem to work for me and the people that I'm playing with. Um, so instead, I decided to go what I'm calling semi-open table, inspired somewhat by what is it, Justin Alexander at the Alexandrian. And so the basic idea is this, right? I have set up an area that I call the Northern Reaches. I did, in fact, name this space before Kelsey had her Shadow Dark. Well, the West, I think it's the Western Reaches, I believe, is what she calls the next book that was kickstarted at some point, I think a few months ago, at the time of making the bit of this video. In any case, right, so I have the Northern Reaches. I have like a general map that I put together. I used some supplements from, at the time I didn't actually have the Shadow Dark book, so instead I used other supplements to like fill in terrain and that kind of stuff, to figure out what the danger level is, that I know how we're going to roll for things in terms of um, random encounters, that kind of thing. In any case, right, so I have the space, and then I am using a 3-2-1 method, which I learned from Mike Shea at Sly Flourish. The 3-2-1 method is very straightforward. That is, you give your characters 3 quests. Of those 3 quests, they choose one to pursue. Once they've completed it, they have the 2 remaining quests. Once they've completed one of those 2, you get rid of the third one, and then you continue with providing 3 more quests. So I'm doing that kind of thing. Now, the big difference is because Shadowdark is much more location based than event based, right? That does mean that like these other rumors that you got, they don't just vanish; they still exist. So you could always go back to them. But instead, I'm using this as a way to figure out when to provide additional locations for them to then explore. And in terms of the locations, there's a combination of me just going out and finding things, right? So I spend a lot of time on Drive Through RPG just looking for free solo dark, free free Shadow Dark adventures, that kind of thing that look like they're an appropriate level, or adapting things that I can find elsewhere. Basic Fantasy, for example, has loads of free material on their website, so take it, modify it, like just swap out the Shadow Dark creatures for the creatures that are there, and then you're good to go. And like part of me was a little bit concerned when I looked at some of that stuff. I'm like, okay, well, like the amount of treasure isn't quite right. Right? It doesn't feel right. But then on the other hand, one of the great things that I love about Shadow Dark is inventory management matters. So yeah, here's a treasure chest filled with 5,000 gold pieces. Guess what? You can't carry it all. Unless you want to leave all your armor here, you could do that, I guess, right? But then between the 4 of you, you still don't have enough, still don't have enough inventory space to take all 5,000 gold pieces. So, that's kind of the way I'm dealing with this, I suppose. And that gives them a reason to come back, right? So, yeah, if you leave treasure because you know that you know that you can't carry it, you may come back later, and then the whole dungeon might be restocked or whatever. In any case, right? Well, I did want to tell a little bit, and I think I have introduced this a little bit before when I had a a solo Shadowdark session. So what I'm doing with that third one, the one they don't do, then that's where I send my solo characters in to pursue that. So this last session that I ran, right, we're only meeting once a month, right? Because schedules are crazy, right? And basically the way that I run it is as a one shot, right? So each of these quests you should be able to complete or at least pursue for a session, and then I have mechanisms inside of the world that send you home if you don't go home yourself, right? So everything's one shots. If you can come this month, awesome. If not, fine. You just don't have you there. You don't get XP because you're not there. You didn't get any experience because you're not there. You didn't get any treasure because you weren't there to get the treasure. Because it's that straightforward. In any case, let's focus, Professor. What were going to say? So this last session uh, was purely travel. Is purely travel because when I first created this, it's a peninsula, right? That they're traveling, and I was trying to figure out how big would be appropriate, and I wasn't really sure, right, how big to make this thing. So I thought, well, okay, what would be a reasonable space that's kind of big but not too big? So, well, I live in the state of Ohio. So I mean, how big is Ohio, right, from north to south? Let's just do that. Right? And then it was a random map generator that gave me the map, so I just kind of used this for the scaling was the idea. Right? And it turns out I have a map that is, I believe, something like 400 hexes. No, one direction it's only like 40 hexes or something like that. Which, when you do the math, it turns out that's still a really, really big space. I didn't really think about how big this space was because, like, I'm used to thinking I live in northern Ohio. I can be to the southern, like, edge of Ohio in like under 2 hours. Like if I lived way up on the lake, right, like far north of Ohio, I could be all the way down at the Ohio River in under 3 hours, most likely. So it's not that big, right? Sure, if you have interstate highways and cars, but my characters don't have that. My characters instead, right, walk. Walking all that distance, right? And these are in the way that I have things set up. There aren't like nice, well-maintained roads or anything like that. No, the the conceit of it is that this is an area that was cut off for some reason. We don't know exactly why. That has not been described, uh, at least to the characters. And I personally have a vague idea, to be perfectly honest. But I know that some kind of thing happened, right? That then led 1,000 years ago to the decision to we're going to build a wall to cut off this area. Now, to be very clear, there's also water around this area. You can just get on a boat and go there. Yeah. But in any case, and there was some of that that has happened historically. I've decided I have some settlements and stuff. In any case, that aside, so yeah, I didn't realize how big it was. Um, and something about this incident is keeping there from being like a kingdom or something like that on the other side of this wall. So things are very disconnected. And that is part of the idea of this, right? That you're not going to have a whole lot of interaction more than like one or two hexes away at absolute most, right? So then things can be very separated. Uh, and that's part of the goal of the design. In any case, so we got together 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. And naturally, we have a little bit of chatting, that kind of stuff. And one of my players had to leave. I knew like between 5 and 5:30. So, and this is pretty typical. Like normally we get together and somebody has to leave somewhere around 5 o'clock, right? So that's where like I said, I have like built into the structure of the thing where if we hit a point where somebody has to leave, then bam, they're teleported back, right, to home base, more or less. Well, this entire session was just navigating to a place they wanted to be. Because what I did to determine these locations, they had 3 new locations, and then I just rolled randomly to figure out where they were on the map, and then I dropped locations in that were appropriate to the terrain. Right, so okay, I'm not going to put something like a dwarven mine in the middle of the forest. That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So, but hey. one of the terrains that we have is a forest. One of the places that we have that we can go is appropriate to be in the forest. Say it's, I don't know, a stronghold or something that wouldn't be nonsensical for it to be in the middle of the forest, right? So that's what we did. So I have these three locations, and the one that they chose, they were really attracted to because it said that an old warlord had vaults brimming with gold or something like that. That was one of the rumors that I rolled for. It's actually a prefab location. Uh, Interestingly, has very little to do with what is actually happening there right now. But hey, we've had a wall for 1,000 years. We don't know what's actually happening. But this is the rumor. And they said brimming with gold sounds great because we want to buy new equipment because we're tired of having to make death saves. That's Shadowdark. You do that all the time. They're only level 2. Right, so they travel. And the travel rules that I'm using, I forget the name of it. It's like Shadows into the Wild or something like that, where somebody took the official Shadowdark rules and adapted them so they're very well designed for hex crawling. Um, Now, some of them definitely need tweaks here and there. For example, it's not clear what you do according to this set of travel rules if, say, you're traveling a known path or something like that. Whereas in Core Book, it's very clear you don't actually have to make navigation rules if you know where you're going in terms of like, actually having navigated it before. So, in any case, so we're traveling a very, very long path. Now, and I'm making some modifications to the rules because, for example, in this book, they say if you fail your navigation roll, you just go a random direction, which means it's possible you might stumble the right way, which makes sense to me. Whereas, on the other hand, the rules I had been using, it was you just kind of get stuck in that hex. It's like you're just traveling in this, I guess, a 6 mile radius circle or 6 mile diameter circle, whatever. Right? So you're stuck here inside that same hex, and you don't move until you succeed. I thought it would be much more fun to do the whole go a random direction thing because then hey you're going somewhere, right? So all the session was about 3 hours of like, one character that had reasonably high intelligence, right, making the rolls to try to make the next step in navigation, and then they would sometimes make it, sometimes they would fail and end up going the wrong direction, and then they'd have to adjust to everything. It was a lot of fun. And then me rolling to see whether or not we had any kind of random encounters. If we had a random encounter, then I rather than having my own random encounter tables, I'm like, you know what? Kelsey gave us a bunch of stuff here. It is great fun. And one thing that I love about this is that even though say they're traveling through the mountains because as you travel through this across this peninsula, there's this mountain range that kind of cuts across it. Um, Say the point where they were kind of having to travel through the mountains. They didn't have any choice about that. I decided I was not going to bother with difficulty of terrain. It's taking long enough. I don't want them to try to calculate like what the fastest path is or something like that. Yeah, it's my mistake making the map too big. In any case, right, so we are rolling in here on the mountain random encounter tables, which they have very nice here. Right there, we got some mountain random encounter tables right there. In any case, and one thing that was hilarious is that somehow we ended up rolling the same encounters like a bunch of times. There are 50 encounters in here, right, for the mountains. And the number of times in which they heard a snow giant singing from the top of the mountains as they were traveling was incredible. Or the number of times they met a two-headed ogre where the heads are arguing with each other about how salty the stew should be, or I forget what exactly it is, but something along those lines. Incredible. Right? So one thing that I love about that, and here's where I'm going to get the closest to anything potentially useful in the 15 minutes in which I've been talking, is that using these big random encounter tables and having the same kind of thing pop up, one, is hilarious. But also then gives me ideas that the next time they travel, right, one, they actually, I don't know that they actually made it to the location before time ran out, but they got close. They got close, which means the next time in terms of playtime, I'm just going to say, okay, you can travel there roughly halfway. There's a random encounter. And can you guess what the random encounter is going to be? Right? Yeah. like we've already established, they're a bunch of two-headed ogres, they're a bunch of snow giants. Now, it just so happens that they had always rolled well enough in their keeping watch rolls that the way that I ruled that was that the party then got to decide how they're going to deal with this encounter, and it was always possible for them, if they wished, to just avoid the encounter. And because they had some experience the previous week of what was a borderline TBK, I let them spend their luck token. I decided to make luck tokens easy on me. Just everybody gets a luck token at the beginning. Use it for a reroll whenever you want. That's it. That's all I'm going to do because I don't want to have to evaluate whether what you just did is luck token worthy or not. I don't want to think about that because I'm here to have fun, not to think. All right. So everybody still had their luck tokens. So I said, you know what? Okay, maybe you didn't, in fact, all die. Like technically should have happened. Instead, you just got captured. Uh, and these orcs are feeling particularly magnanimous to you because, hey, there's a half orc amongst you. They're just curious, why is it we have a couple elves and a half orc and a goblin traveling together? So, yeah, okay. Right, so they decide to let you go. Just, don't come back, that kind of thing. Right, so this experience then is making my players a little bit more cautious, which is good because they need to learn that while Shadowdark is in some sense built on uh, the world's most popular role-playing game, it is not that game. It has some differences, and one of those differences is, yeah, even like your strongest character has a single-digit hit points because you're only level 2. It's not necessarily the way things work in some games. Right, so they've started to get this. So one thing one of my players actually explicitly said that he has learned that talking is often a good option, which is true, which is true. Or, as was the case here, uh, he was the one actually making the keep watch rolls and was rolling fantastically, right? So there were very few uh, encounters where like they didn't have some warning, right, where they could decide what to do, right? So they walked past so many two-headed ogres, they walked past so many singing snow giants, and that was perfectly fine. It was providing some flavor, told me something about the area, and now next time they go, my best interpretation of the Shadowdark rules is that when you're traveling a known path, you do not have to roll for navigation. So you don't have to make these intelligence rolls to make sure you don't get lost, which is awesome because otherwise it takes literally forever for my players to move from where they begin as far north as they want to go. Right, so I don't want them to spend the next several sessions just trying to move and getting through. No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. But if you're traveling a known path, there is still the issue of random encounters that comes in. And random encounters sensibly should happen, at least you should roll for them in every hex because of travel periods and the way that the rules end up being interpreted, right? So every 1 to 3 hours, according to the core rules, which then just gets modified to a number of rolls based on the hex travel and all of that. In any case, what this all is boiling down to is that I still am going to have to make random encounter rolls. But they're going to be traveling something in the neighborhood of 30 or more hexes, I believe, to get to where they want to go. And that means there's the potential here for something like 30 random encounters, especially because once they get really far north, the way that I just randomly rolled things, there was a lot of very, very dangerous areas that they're going to be in, which means that it's basically certain that they're going to be hitting a random encounter in basically every single hex. I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So instead, I think I'm going to use a different method, and that is it's a long way. Along this path, I am going to, before the session starts, I'm going to decide where they're going to hit a random encounter and what the random encounter is, and I suspect I'm going to make that random encounter be something like, I don't know, a two-headed ogre or a snow giant, or the kind of things that they ran into. Right, so I think that that's kind of the direction that I'm going at this point. In any case, um, just some other thoughts while I'm just stream of conscious ing. Sure, that can be a verb. Welcome to English language. Um, so while I'm stream of consciousing, uh, highly recommend this method. So, assuming that you want to do some kind of group play, I really like the idea that I've tried, and that is the 3-2-1 method. Everything you're offering is a one shot, right? Something that is at least potentially completable in some sense within a single session, right? Or at least you can make progress within a single session, right? And it does not depend on the specific characters playing, right? So now that means then, right, that you are not going to be trying to do what, say, certain very popular RPG shows might do, right? You're not going to be building uh, story around your PCs. Now, certainly, if your PCs have things they're connected to in the world, right, you can use those things. That's not a problem. But I think it's a good idea to do what I've been doing, and that is one, let your schedule as the one running the game be what determines when the game happens. Right. Right. So and just declare it. Just declare it. Say, here's the day that I'm available. Here's the time. If you can make it, awesome. If you can't make it, that's fine. I get it. Other people have things happening in their lives. And I'm at the stage in my life where lots of people have lots of things happening, and that's perfectly fine. I mean, I have lots of things happening. That's why I only offer one session a month, right? So we're not playing every week because I'm not going to be able to do that. I can't manage that with um, the other things that I have going on in my life, and that's perfectly fine, right? Right, so just declare it. Right, have a like what I have is a kind of a core set of people where see, I think total I have like 6 players. Of those, typically 4 are going to be able to come. If I can't get 4, then that's perfectly fine. Now, one thing that I do have kind of one thing that's nice for me is that I do have one player who is extremely flexible because I'm married to her, right? Which means, right, then as long as even one other player can show up, I'm going to have 2 players and I can run for 2 players. That's not a problem. I think it's a little bit weird for me to run just for one player, which is odd for me to say as somebody who plays solo, but I don't know, it feels kind of weird. So in any case, because I think there's benefit to being able to like split up tasks and work together on things, right? So in any case, uh, so as long as I get at least one person that doesn't live in my house to show up, right, then I can run. And then if everybody wants to come and I think it's a little bit too big, guess what? My wife has other things she can do, so she's perfectly content to not do that thing, right? So this is also perfectly fine. So I've just a set of a core set of players that I can pull from. Now, naturally, based on your own group, if you have people who are more available, less available, you might need to adjust, right, the number of core players you have. You might also need to say limit the number of players you take in particular sessions. Say, well, I'm willing to run for up to 6 people. So I'll just, hey, first 6 who say you're available, let me know, and you're the ones that are in. You could do that. It's very, very straightforward. So I kind of like this method. I do. Works for me. So these are all just kind of ideas, things that I've been playing with, and it's been a lot of fun. I also just want to note, I also do really, really like, right, Shadowdark as a game, right? So one of my players, it's my dad, had never played role-playing games in his life. Now his sister, my aunt, did, right, when she was in college, but he didn't. She was a few years older than him, and I don't know that even he knew that she did. But in any case, right, so she would have been around, like, oh, let's see. No, it wouldn't have, like, if it was in college, yes, it would have been like the really early days of like original Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. I never really got the chance to talk to her much about it. She passed away a few years ago. In any case, but I found out through my cousin who also played, whatever. But I think this is a great introduction because it is beautifully streamlined, right? And it's also very easy, right, to do very little prep with this thing. Like the prep tools are nice, It can maybe tend a little bit overly random, but nonetheless can provide you with inspiration, and then you can go from there to do what you want. But I will say, boy, if you have once you have a map with different terrain types, one, in making that map, I do actually really like what Kelsey has in here for the overland. What is it? What does she call it? The overland map or something like that? Overland hex map. That's the section. That's the section. The overland hex map. So what she has here, the big difference that from this and what I did, is that I want there to be points of interest everywhere, as opposed to just one out of every six on average, right? So I don't want you to be just traveling through a bunch of hexes without there even being the possibility of there being something there, right? So there we go. So using this to make the map is awesome. Once you have the map with the terrain types, you have in here various random encounters that you can use. Fantastic as well. Then, if you want to, you can make your own personalized random encounter list, perhaps like I'm planning to do, based on things that have happened, right, from bigger lists, right? So that in future sessions, you've narrowed things down, right? So I think that's a nice technique. So just wanted to say, love Shadowdark. It's fantastic. It's a lot of fun. So highly recommend. In any case, I will be back with other episodes of other stuff at some point. Until then, this is Prof E, signing off.